Welcome back to another episode of Timebreaker Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel.
And I'm Anthony.
And today we're continuing on our trend from last week talking about Batman Begins. We're talking about The Dark Knight today, the esteemed Dark Knight. Great film, nominated for 8 Academy Awards, won 2 for Best Achievement in Sound Editing, and of course for Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker. Are you excited, Anthony?
Absolutely. This movie is remarkable.
Definitely is. Like I said before in the last episode, I hadn't seen any Chris Nolan movies until I saw Interstellar in 2014, and then I checked out the Batman movies, and I've heard good things about this one in particular. Like I was like, everybody's like, "Yo, The Dark Knight's really awesome. Heath Ledger kills it as the Joker." I had zero exposure to any of these characters, any iteration before of seeing this film, and I'm glad this was the first time I ever saw that. Like, cause this set the standard for not only Batman movies, but also the Joker. Every other Joker I've seen does not hold a candle up to Heath Ledger. And just this movie took it to the next level. Would you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely do agree. And this was one of the first movies that I ever really... Star Wars Episode 3, I was kind of restricted on watching, but this one, when it first hit theaters, was a hard no. No matter what, I was not allowed to see this movie. It took months of convincing to get this one to be allowed to watch. And actually, to put it even worse, I had to watch this movie for the first time in full screen.
Oh my god.
On
That's
DVD
terrible.
too.
Oh my god.
But hey, it's great.
Yeah, I bet, But like you said, this movie, yeah, it really pushes that PG-13 barrier. Not so much of just gore per se, but just in terms of how realistic the approach to the filmmaking is, you kind of can see that this is kind of plausible, this is very criminal activity. It's very dark and disturbing, subject matter with how these murders go down and the way that the Joker moves around the city and the things he does. And it's just a very unnerving feeling you get throughout the whole movie because you don't know what's going on, what he's going to do next. He is an agent of chaos. All these things are happening unexpectedly, and you just never know how far he's going to take it. I think that's why it really gets that rap.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just got lots of dark themes in it, and it's that blend of politics as well as just the action movie that you expect from Nolan, because he's really good with these action sequences, as he proved in Batman Begins.
Yeah, and I feel like he really took it to the next level. Batman Begins, there were some fight stuff, but rewatching it, the fights and the choreography is shot, it's there, but I feel like it could be shot better, and I feel like the improvement to the cinematography and the scope and just the execution of all the action sequences of this movie really take it to the next level.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and on top of that, I would even go as far to say that this is one of his best movies in the way that it's choreographed and the way that he uses the camera to, put you in the footsteps of these individuals and watching things go down. And I think it just proves as a filmmaker that Batman Begins he was still learning, and The Dark Knight was where he was really starting to learn his own stride.
Yeah, definitely. And, talking about coming into his own stride, this was also... where the comic book movies were starting to get their footing. This was released in 2008. Iron Man, starting off the MCU, came out as well. And so we're starting to enter this world where things are getting bigger and bigger, and the box office for these types of movies are heating up, as I'm sure you got some more info on.
Yeah, back in 2008, while this movie didn't cross $1 billion, it made about $900 million back in 2008, 950, really close to $1 billion, but it didn't quite cross it. But I believe it made over $500 million in the United States alone, United States and Canada, which, at the time was... there wasn't as many billion-dollar movies back then. In 2008, Avatar hadn't even come out yet, so you're looking at Titanic and Lord of the Rings as your 2 biggest movies, so this was up there probably in the top 5.
Yeah, what do you think that is for this jump? Because we talked about last week how the Batman Begins, it made money, but it didn't make crazy money. It wasn't Spider-Man levels money. So do you think that's just people warming up to the superhero genre, or the fact that we got a taste of it in Batman Begins, so now we kind of know what to expect? Or do you think it's kind of like the Joker effect, as we've seen even with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker? That did crazy numbers. So do you think it's just that character? Or what do you think made the huge increase in the revenue?
I think it has to do with a lot of factors. This movie was like critically acclaimed, and people were pretty like off-put. As far as I remember, people talking about it when I was little, they were off-put because they didn't think Heath Ledger could beat a Joker. But I think the way the trailers were constructed, and then just word of mouth, I also think that Batman Begins just it got a better reputation at home and like its video sales and DVD rentals and stuff. People got exposure to it at home, and so by the time The Dark Knight came out in 2008, I think people were ready to see what the next chapter was. Nolan also released a Prestige during this time, it was less seen. I think it was just a lot of things came together to create this perfect tide. And on top of that, Heath Ledger had passed away, so this was Heath Ledger's last film, and I think that might have also played a part into bringing people out. But I really think it just has to do with the movie and how well it was received. Everyone loved this movie. I've never heard anyone say that this movie is just awful.
Oh yeah, it's unheard of. And speaking of like that, like the way that this movie is talked about and the way that this movie is perceived, like we talk a lot about great comic book movies, right? We talk about Spider-Man 2. We talk about First Avengers. We talk about Iron Man. We talk about, these great comic book superhero movies, but we don't talk about them the same way we talk about Dark Knight, because I feel like The Dark Knight, and even in my rating scale where I got my own thing going on, I rate this movie in the transcendent category, which very few films have gotten, because I feel like it's exactly that. It's not just a comic book movie. This is now a crime drama. It's that elevated tone of storytelling, gets the critics' attention. You got performances like Heath Ledger, and you're putting on masterclass work behind the camera of Chris Nolan and everybody doing this amazing stuff with these bigger effects than they normally do for like these Oscar movies. And I think it just soars on a completely different level than the average comic book movie.
I think it also is like this starting point for comic book movies that learn that, okay, playing the origin story, just having the villain wasn't enough. Like, I feel like this was the first exposure to a type of film that, yes, it's a superhero movie, but it's like its subgenre is really superhero, but it has a main focus on what it wants to be. And we've seen this in Marvel, and it's been super successful. We have Captain America, the Winter Soldier. It's a political movie, and it's a thriller. And then Ant-Man's a comedy but an action movie. I think later on they really started to embrace this, but at the time it really just wasn't seen. Superhero movies were superhero movies, and this was like the first example of a superhero movie just being a really good movie.
Yeah, and completely knocking it out of the park and taking it to those deeper levels. You hear a lot of this talk, especially after this movie came out. There's this huge movement in the Hollywood and filmmaking community about like making your sequel darker and going that next level and making the trailer intense and everything. We've seen this before, right? Like Empire Strikes Back did this. I'd argue Spider-Man 2 did this. The sequel is supposed to dive deeper. We've already established the characters, the world. We don't have to deal with the origin of Batman. He can start the movie off already as Batman and dive right into a more grounded and deeper and emotional story now that you already have all these things set up at stake. And I think that this movie just does that tenfold.
Yeah, and on top of that, I'm curious if, at Warner Brothers, if this was at the time when you said they were like, Nolan, go ahead, make a sequel. I wonder if they were kind of worried after Batman Begins box office. Can we maybe make 500 million? I don't think anyone expected to make almost $1 billion.
Right, too. And especially, too, like, I mean, Nolan had made lots of movies before, but there's still a lot of things that he had not done yet. I mean, he dealt with the cop world in Insomnia, too, and he's still like I'd say he's like an intermediate director at this point. He's got several films under his belt, but this was his first sequel. So like you said, I don't know how people really reacted to or anticipated like how he was going to do with a sequel, because he's always done original stuff before this.
Right, and on top of that, if we're talking about this as also just a point for him, okay, so we all know Nolan is lived for IMAX. This was his start. Like, this was the first time he got his hands on that IMAX camera, and I remember people were always talking about how great this movie was in IMAX because of that additional footage, on top of just the pure resolution you get out of IMAX. And so those sequences were just stunning, and it was something that people had never seen before, and I think that also just helped contribute. I mean, it makes Nolan films have their own distinct look because they're always shot in IMAX now.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't get to see this in IMAX, unfortunately, but like even on my, I don't got the 4K copy, albeit, but on my Blu-ray copy, I still got that IMAX footage, and it's so refreshing to see when we get those scene transitions to a new location. We get the full extent of the IMAX footage on those nice wide drone / helicopter shots of the city, and when Batman's like overlooking the city, or even some of the bigger action sequences, like when they flip the semi truck. It's so cool to see it in that format, and I think it really changes it.
Right, and it's not like it's the same as seeing an IMAX. You're still losing some of that image on the top and bottom, but the fact that you're not restricted to a letterbox on Nolan films is just refreshing. And yeah, you might not see it in the theater, but the 4K copy is, I believe it's a rescan, and so it just looks brilliant because I do own the 4K copy and it looks outstanding.
Yeah, and even it's just another tool, I feel like, to help tell your story, like utilizing it for the opening wide shots, I think adds something to it. Or even when we go talk down the line, Interstellar, the way they use it for using the IMAX footage for the space content and then using the regular aspect ratio for at home, when you're cross-cutting it, it kind of adds another layer to your subconscious to help you position where we are in the story. And with all the cross-cutting that Nolan juggles between this scene going down, I'm thinking particularly of the sequence when the Joker says he's going to kill 3 different people, and we're juggling between he kills the judge in the car, and then the police commissioner when he drinks the cup, and and then he shows up to the party and he tries to kill Harvey Dent. Like, there's all these moving pieces going around, and when you're switching between the formats, it just helps you figure out where we are in the story.
Yeah, and I think Nolan just really realized that, okay, I want to experiment with this, and in experimenting with it, he realized just how much of a superior format it can be in select scenarios. I mean, he still hasn't shot something 100% IMAX because I think he realized that there's no particular need to do it. It loses its like exclusivity, its feeling when it's just a whole movie. And it's not to gripe on movies that are full IMAX. I appreciate movies like Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, even Sully. They were all shot on IMAX. It's just when you don't give consumers the option to ever see that footage again, it's like go out and see it during that 2-week period, where I feel there's a difference with Nolan films that today I can still pop a Blu-ray in and see maybe not all that additional footage on the top and bottom, but I can at least see some of it, and you get to see that aspect ratio change and really get to see what the director intended for you to see.
Yeah, and I really appreciate how much he values that footage and how it makes its way into the home releases. I do really appreciate that. And I think it adds something to it too, and we're seeing other filmmakers starting to take inspiration from that. Like we saw Jon Favreau in The Mandalorian do that. We've seen Mission Impossible Fallout do that. And I think, yes, you said like how this was his first film doing that, so he was still experimenting with it. And you said he uses it selectively, and I think that's a great way, because he's talked about doing it and how his approach to it is. And if you notice here, it's only really the big wide shots for when we're establishing a new location, and then a big action sequence. Those are the main times he'll use it, especially early on, like in this film when he's first touching it, because I think he said before the camera technology, while it's great and can capture a lot, it's also like very big and loud, so it's hard to get close up into those dialogue scenes and get intimate with the actors. And it also is a louder camera, so your audio in those dialogue sequences is going to be a little sketchy, and he doesn't like relying on ADR and recording lines after and putting them back in post. So you can see how it just creates that little dynamic of, we're going to use this camera for these certain scenes and then cut back to what we know for the stuff that really matters when we're staying close to the actors.
Yeah, and going on this point of, selective uses of a camera to give this feeling. It goes into that artistic vision. And while I can sit here and gripe about sometimes where I don't like something, I will sit here to the day I die and tell you I do not love the fact that the only way to watch Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, is in a 4:3 aspect ratio. And I can sit here and gripe about it, but at the end of the day, it was his decision to film it like that, and while I might not agree with it, at least we have it, and I would appreciate having it, even if I don't particularly love it myself, rather than have a cropped version that doesn't work.
So speaking of all the new improvements that Nolan had made to his production stuff behind the camera, let's also talk in front of the camera. We got a lot of cool new stuff. It is a sequel, and it really does upgrade in every aspect, as a sequel should. We got new Batsuit. I like the new Batsuit way more than the first Batsuit. I don't know why. It's more agile, it's cleaner, it's nicer, it's dope. We also got the motorcycle thing that comes out of the Batmobile. I thought that was cool. And I also feel like on top of that, we got brand new takes and deeper takes in all the characters we've come to know and love. I feel like Gordon really shines in this movie. I feel like Rachel shines more in this movie. Now she's Maggie Gyllenhaal instead of Katie Holmes. I was not bothered by that. Were you bothered by that?
No, I mean, I was so young when I saw it. I was like, something's off. I don't even think I realized it was another person. I mean, they really do a good job at executing it.
Yeah, and they play it. They don't make a big deal out of it. I don't think you should. You just take it for what it is. And another great new addition we have is Aaron Eckert as Harvey Dent. What do you think of Harvey Dent?
Oh, I absolutely loved his character in this movie. I mean, it is such a rich and detailed story that he goes through throughout this arc, and I think it's just really ironic, the fact that he talks about how you don't want to become the villain, and in the end he does become the villain. I mean, it's irony.
Yeah, he's a heart and soul of the film, and he's, like they said, he's Gotham's White Knight. He's the guy to take him into the future, and in the end, that's Joker's endgame. It's to take him out and turn him against everybody. And while Joker fails at making the people kill each other, he succeeds and turns Harvey and ruins Gotham, forever until the next film, right?
Yeah, and it's something I really like in film, is when the villain doesn't particularly succeed at everything, but they succeed at something that's meaningful enough that it has a rippling effect on the storyline. Yeah. And you can definitely see that in the ending of this film, that while the Joker failed to show that the people were as cruel and mean and hateful as he hoped, but that he was still able to turn Harvey Dent from their White Knight.
Exactly. And, that had lingering effects for us as the audience viewing it. And then you also end up seeing those, on display in The Dark Knight Rises. And I think it really sets up that closing chapter and that tie-in very well. And, speaking of the mastermind behind this, Heath Ledger, rest his soul, does a phenomenal job in this movie. Like, I can't describe how amazing he is, from the opening scene, right? Let's start there. What's that scene all about?
Oh, I love that scene. Just the fact that he is hidden inside of the bank robbers in the bank heist at the beginning. I mean, it's really just a perfect way to open a movie, because at first you're thinking it's just randoms, and it's not until the very end when you realize that, no, the Joker's right here, because he's like, no, I take out the bus driver. And it's all about diverting expectations. I think that's all that sequels can really do to make them shine from, your expectations of a sequel. Because, we get expectations of sequels from other sequels, and sometimes they fall for Iron Man 2. I mean, they took some of the things that worked and they tried to put some more things in that didn't work. And so overall the film's okay. But when you pretty much go clean slate and go, the audience has no idea what they're sitting down for, it really works.
Yeah, and it just also gets us to see how smart and how different this character is going to be, different from any criminal, like he starts having them kill each other off. I'd never seen something like that, but that makes perfect sense if you only want one cut for the entire thing. And then how he's blending in with the rest of them makes perfect sense. And like you said, diverting expectations. I this is something I feel like we missed last episode on Batman Begins, but Nolan's writing style, he also is very good at creating these twists and turns, especially in these crime Batman movies, like didn't see Ra's al Ghul coming back, didn't see all these twists and turns and revelations, and then he takes it to another level in this film by introducing the Joker, because you never know what he is gonna do.
Yeah, and someone's mentioned to me before that Nolan has an obsession with time, and I think this was one of the first times he kind of got to mess with that as well. In the interrogation scene with Joker and the Batman, and when he figures out the location, you as the audience can only guess how much time is left, and Nolan's really playing on that. He thinks he makes you feel like there's enough time to get both, and then at the last second he blows the second building up. And so you can see the crippling effect it has on Batman when he realizes that, it's not Rachel and that it's Harvey Dent, but he still, because he's the hero, pulls him out of there. And you can see the agony when Gordon shows up and he's not fast enough.
Yeah, like totally diverting the expectations. And I mean, when you look back after you've seen it, it makes perfect sense that the Joker would switch him and not tell him the right thing. But when I'm locked into that movie that first time and I'm seeing it, and I'm like, oh my God, he's told them the different places because he knew he'd go for Rachel and end up getting Harvey. And it's a perfect execution of the plan, and you don't see it coming. Oh my gosh, so good.
It's really a masterpiece at that section, because the Joker's doing it to hurt Harvey, but what he ends up doing is he hurts Batman at the same time, which only as the audience member do you realize. The Joker doesn't even realize that, how meaningful it is that he blew Rachel up. Because the Joker's only goal was to hurt Harvey Dent.
Are you sure? Do you think the Joker knows who it is? Who Batman is?
I feel like they play around with it, but because the film never fully addresses it, I'm going to go with he may have a slight idea, but I don't think he does.
Okay, because I don't know, like the way he's like talks about how like Batman throws himself at Rachel and stuff, I think he kind of knows, but like you said, yeah, they never like acknowledge it. And I think that's okay that they don't acknowledge it, because then it allows us to have this conversation, does he not know? And it doesn't change the story.
I think the Joker realizes that Batman, cares for Rachel, but I don't think that goes hand in hand with like him knowing who Batman is. I don't think he knows who Batman is. I just think that he saw the way he jumped after her and assumes that he cares for her.
Yeah. But speaking of who knows who Batman is, that they address that in this film too. Like that dude who crunches the numbers for Wayne Enterprises, he knows, and they got to protect him. And then like Bruce Wayne comes in and saves him, and they get this little head nod thing. And he knows, but he knows to stay hush hush about it. I thought that was cool how they included that as well.
Oh yeah, dude, I really like that scene, because he just goes, when Gordon's like, hey, thanks for saving us, he says, I did?
Oh yeah. Just trying to beat the light. Classic.
Going into another section of the film I really like, it's a semi-chase in the middle.
Oh my gosh. And the fact that it's all practical, it just makes it so much more believable, and just it's amazing to see that.
Yeah, and especially if you watch it on a Blu-ray disc, that scene looks stunning in its full aspect ratio. I mean, it's just, yes. And especially when the semi flips over, I mean, it's really just, it's awesome to watch.
Yes, it's awesome because it's an actual semi. You hear me, Marvel? It's an actual semi they flipped. And we're not even at Dark Knight Rises yet, so we'll talk about that one next. But yeah, it's a great action sequence. And again, another twist and turn that you realize that Gordon didn't die, because you think he dies like halfway in this film.
Yeah, I think that's I was shocked the first time I watched it, because I thought he was dead, and they pulled it off really well.
Yeah, and you assume he's dead because you realize, and the tone that Nolan has set up in these films is that yes, people are gonna die. We're not messing around. And when they're dead, they're dead. And so you're like, oh my gosh, because the Joker's knocking people off every day because Batman hasn't revealed who he is. And then when Gordon goes, you're like, oh my God, he's dead. And then he comes back. And then since people actually die and there is that weight, then it comes as a surprise when he's alive.
Right, and this is the first moment, right when Gordon dies, is really the first moment you get to see Harvey Dent starting to go the other way. And the film works really well on slowly, gradually shifting him at first, and then the moment Rachel dies, it goes off the cliff. He's going off the cliff. He's one off the edge, and it really just leads into that final act where you have a second conflict because you have the Joker and the people on the boats, but then you
Right.
secretly, and I think Nolan really did this well, you don't actually spend much time with Harvey Dent in the third act after he, kills a few people. After that, you really don't see him for a little bit, and he comes back right at the end because, and as a storytelling, the way that it works with the Joker telling Batman when he finally captures him that, pretty much he won. And then you really get to truly cut back to Harvey and see that final moment.
Right. And I think props to Nolan for the way he wrote it because of how light Harvey is in the third act and how entranced Harvey is to the Joker's plan and how he's talking about tainting the White Knight into making him Harvey Two-Face. It's great. And by the time we get to Harvey, it's short, it's concise, and it happens. And I think it's so great that it doesn't take a long time, because then I feel like we would have a fourth act and then the movie would overstay its welcome. It's my biggest gripe with Batman versus Superman, the inclusion of Doomsday, because I feel like we beat the story is kind of ending and then we include this extra boss at the end and then it just increases it for nothing. I'm really glad that they tied the movie off really fast with Harvey at the end.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of movies do overstay their welcome because they throw in that last, they throw in the last unexpected thing, but really it comes off as too much in one movie.
And the Harvey scene, I don't even think it's like five minutes long. Like it's really is the last scene of the film if you really think about it.
Yeah, it is the last scene, but it really plays the biggest play in this movie and its ending and setting up The Dark Knight Rises.
And I think it's so cool how they didn't have to end with the Joker. He goes out and he goes kind of quietly, almost like he has his lasting impact, leads us to Harvey, and then he kind of just fades away, and you're just like, oh, okay, he won, but he's not in it anymore. And there were lots of rumors and stuff, and talks about how Chris Nolan may or may not have included him in The Dark Knight Rises, and then he passed away, and there's just all this stuff going on. And I think the way everything worked out, and just what he committed to this film was so perfect. And I think stretching it out and like adding it to another film, I think would have taken away from this one a little bit. And The Dark Knight Rises is already very ambitious, and I feel like that would just make it too much,
Yeah, I understand with it. I'm not sure if not having the Joker in the third movie, I think we just would have gotten a very different third movie. And I think Nolan had originally planned to have Joker in the third one because he left it really open-ended with Joker at the end of this one. But sadly, because Heath Ledger passed away, I think he just had to scrap everything and start from the beginning on where he wanted to go with the third movie. But I think he knew he wanted to end it on the third movie.
Right, and then there's that, we'll talk about it next episode, that whole thing about they want the fourth one, and I think that's just ridiculous. But I just really quick, I want to give more praise to Heath Ledger and his performance, so great. Even just the approach to it, I've heard he did his own makeup for it in a lot of parts, and you can even, and that approach to the character too, it's the character did it himself, and that's why it's fading a little bit, and the white is on his fingertips, and it's just so, realistic. It's not like comical and theatrical and over the top. It's very like, this is a serial killer, and this is how he would go about it.
Yeah, I would honestly just go with the fact that his take is so unique. I really, and I don't say this lately, but I don't want to see someone try to repeat his performance. If someone else is going to play the Joker, play it on your own. Play it your own way. Don't copy him, because he didn't copy Nicholson. He took his own approach to this, and I think it made his, Joker unique. And I think it's why, Jared Leto's didn't hold up, and I wasn't a huge fan of the newest Joker we got, but, I really do like Heath Ledger's Joker. So
great. And it's filled with wonderful scenes, and And, you know, like that introduction when they're having their meeting and he kills the guy with the pencil, that I thought was genius. And it just shows you how crazy this guy is. And then we get the Why So Serious, which is legendary monologue out of Heath Ledger. But the moment I knew that this villain and this iteration of Joker was seriously insane, next level, one of the greatest comic book villains we've ever gotten is the dinner party, or the fundraiser for Harvey, because we've already gotten the backstory about why he got the scars and talking about his dad, and then he goes up to Rachel and he puts the knife to Rachel, and then he starts telling a different story how he got the scars. And then you realize, oh, he wasn't telling the truth, or maybe he was, or maybe this is the truth. I don't know. Like, is this guy sane? Is he just making up these stories? Did all these stories happen? You know, like, he's always playing you, and you don't know. It's just the agent of chaos and the unpredictability that comes with this character solidified in that moment to me when I heard him say a different story about the scars.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that just really cement him as the best Joker. I really like his whole take on, you know, once he gets arrested, when Gordon comes and arrests him, seeing how he reacts to being in the jail and the interrogation. I mean, it really shows the Ledger's acting performance, and, you know, the whole "I just want my phone call," you know. It's just, there's a lot of really cool things that just they work really, really, really well. And, you know, going on to other performances, I think Christian Bale does a great job in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Like, he takes what you already know from the first one and really just expands on it, and I think it just really benefited this movie, having a Batman that's, you know, maturing in his crime fighting, but also having to take on a villain that is very different from what he's dealt with.
Yeah, because before, I mean, it was a very personal fight with his mentor, and he's taken out, you know, crime bosses and drug lords, but now we're fighting a guy that does not care about what happens. He blows up a freaking hospital. That scene was improvised, by the way, when he's messing with the trigger, and I think that's genius. But it's really the lengths that the Joker goes to is really testing not only Batman's spirit, but, you know, his will. And we even see that how he's like, yeah, I'm going to turn myself in. And so we're like, oh my gosh, he beat him. And it just really pushes Bruce to the test. And Christian Bale really brings it on both fronts as Bruce and Batman in this film.
Yeah, and just quickly going into the ending to wrap this up, you know, the way I'd honestly compare this movie, at least its ending, is I can almost compare it to Empire, because it ends with our hero fallen. Now, granted, it's not looking at A New Hope, or, well, that's the way I look at the end of Empires. They're looking towards saving Han and all of this, but your heroes are left broken. But this one doesn't end with that ray of sunshine at the end. You know, Batman is gone
He's the
because
new bad
the
guy.
Joker won. And to the people, yeah, he's the new bad guy.
Yeah, I think this ending is absolutely brilliant. It's one of my favorite film endings. I juggle between if this ending is better or if Dark Knight Rises is better, because that is also an amazing ending. But the way it's the montage, Christopher Nolan is great at montages and cross-cutting scenes. He's doing this montage with them saving Harvey and having a nice service for Harvey because they have to paint him as the hero of Gotham. And then they're cutting between Batman getting chased down by the cops, and then they're cutting back to Gordon and his monologue talking to his son about what he is. He's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now. And he's a silent guardian. He's a watchful protector. And then Batman is driving into the spotlight, a dark night, and then it cuts to black, and then we get the Dark Knight title credit with the Hans Zimmer. Dun, 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 dun. It's so perfect.
Honestly, let's just give a round of applause for Hans Zimmer on the score of this movie.
I noticed something too, rewatching. Like, every time the Joker is doing something or is about to kill someone, there's this unnerving, like, ramping up of this, like, metal chord in the background in every soundtrack of the scene. that he is in, and it just adds so much tension. And then it also counterbalances with the Batman theme, that every time Batman comes in, we get that epic theme. And I think those two scores and themes fighting in the soundtrack are amazing in this film.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I've honestly noticed that chord that you're mentioning before, that happens every time. And yeah, just the score, everything about this movie is just so great. And that's really how I'd like to wrap this up, is just, this movie's fantastic. And if you haven't seen this movie, one, why did you watch this? But two, go and watch it.
Exactly. So yeah, and do yourself a service, get the full effect, watch the entire Dark Knight trilogy, and then go back and watch the Batman Begins episode, and then go watch this episode. If you've stuck with us and haven't watched the movie, you're weird, but thanks. And then we'll be doing The Dark Knight Rises in a couple weeks, because we got some new releases that we're going to be talking about beforehand. But don't worry, we will talk about The Dark Knight Rises. But thank you guys for listening. This is my favorite. I think this is the best comic book movie so far.
I think ever. I would agree.
Yeah, I think most people will. There's some contention. Logan is creeping up there, but I think it's a solid number 2. But this is the crown, and I think it will have the crown for a long time to come. But anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Timebreaker Podcast.
If you did enjoy it, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, and make sure to ring that notification bell for new episodes every Wednesday.
See you next week.